And what I'm going to do first is ask each one of them to just give us literally a 3-minute summary of what the main themes and issues and challenges were in the session that they were involved in. So if I could go to you first, Minister Heather Humphreys, on increasing productivity of Irish SMEs.
Thank you, Richard. I have to say we had a very good meeting, and some of the points that came forward was that Irish SMEs need to move up the value chain, and they should consider maybe contracting out low-value activities to overseas so that they can add value to their service or to their product. They also need to add on services onto their product. So for a manufacturing company, they should be able to look at adding something onto that product in the area of services. We need more collaboration for SMEs and multinationals. So we need to bring companies together, maybe through research centres where you have the clustering for product research and development. So it helps a particular sector. Multinationals need to engage more with SMEs. And we recently launched, as you know, the Disruptive Technologies Fund, and that did include SMEs. So you had to have an SME element in your application. I think perhaps we need to do more of that type of collaboration, and maybe when we're launching other competitive funds, we need to get that collaboration with SMEs so that they can benefit from more spillover. We spoke about finance, and the main theme there was not just to look at the traditional forms of finance. It's about putting a package together that may include venture capital and other types of finance raising mechanisms, and not just all totally reliant on banks. We need to improve the financial management skills within the SMEs, and that obviously helps them to prepare better obviously applications that will obviously source funding. Mentoring for SMEs, we felt that there needs to be more mentoring on the ground for SMEs. They need to improve their management skills, and it's good that that they would work in companies that encourage this upskilling, and as I said, mentoring for people to go into the SMEs and actually do the mentoring on the ground, because it's very hard for companies sometimes to release the staff to do this training, or maybe to take time out to do that. And that's what somebody else actually said, that a good office manager, either on a full-time or a part-time basis, can allow some of the critical staff to go there and maybe to look at the vision and for the company and where they want to be and where they need to invest. So it's about allowing them to think sort of outside the box. So if you have somebody in there dealing with the day-to-day things that have to be dealt with, whether it's revenue returns or whatever, that you can actually, as the owner, can think and look at other ways look at a future for your business. So that's basically it. It was a very good session, and I think we got some other issues as well that we will certainly take on board when we're putting together the future plan.
Great, thank you very much. Minister Richard Bruton, innovating and transitioning to the digital and low carbon economies. What were the issues there?
Yeah, I mean, essentially digital and carbon was recognised as being very disruptive to enterprise, but also offering huge opportunities. And I suppose 4 ideas, to be succinct, came forward. One was that we should adopt challenge-based funding rather than the sort of competitive calls that might now be a feature of the Climate Action Fund or the Disruptive Action. So in other words, government or the public service sets the challenge. But it was also commented two qualifications. One, that the choice of challenge should be an area where we can have a competitive advantage. And secondly, that it shouldn't be an all or nothing, that you win and all the others fall away. It should be a staged process, so networks can evolve and platforms form, even if they don't meet the specific challenge, that you don't lose the creativity that the challenge provoked. The second idea was that we need to be more creative in encouraging the formation of partnerships or networks across enterprise, public sector and the wider community. There is some very good exemplars of that in SEAI, but I think the idea was that we need to do more. So one idea was that there should be a mandate to education institutions to develop support networks in the context of digital and carbon challenges, which wouldn't be of the sort of transactional relationship that, say, Enterprise Ireland would have with its innovation vouchers or its specific lean programs, but be more put the onus back on higher education institutions, develop a package and have a more flexible response from government to allow that be a creative institution. Design thinking was also featured, that we need to cultivate design thinking as a key element in any successful enterprise venture in these particular sectors, and that that's a bet. We haven't made any bets on that. The third area was around education and how we nurture talent. I think there was a view that we need to cultivate young people who are at ease with these new technologies, that the present school/teacher system is not properly equipped to nurture that sort of familiarity and competence in some of the challenges, and that is a gap we need to think about. That we need to encourage more young people to be involved in the extracurricular activities that develop those competences in a more bottom-up, with kids designing their own learning space. So that was another major challenge. And the final one was in relation to incentives/tax measures, that we need to design those in a smart way so that they're not just affordable, but that they also motivate and change attitudes, rather than the more narrow economic concept of a subsidy, that it's a deeper change in attitudes that we have to achieve with the design of incentives, rather than just a narrow economic tax approach.
Thank you very much, Minister. Minister Joe McHugh, ensuring we have the necessary talent and skills for the future was your session.
Okay, Richard, we had a very hard-working group. I think we had a 98% participation. 98% of our team contributed, so we covered a broad spectrum. So I think it would take me 4 hours to narrow it down into 3 areas, but I'll attempt to do that. Most importantly, the feedback will be filtered in through our department officials. Kathleen Gavin was up beside me, so every contribution was of value. And also it was an opportunity for me to develop a skill that maybe politicians would sometimes struggle with, which is listening skills. So it was a good opportunity for me to hear from people on an individual basis. But just maybe to divide it up into maybe 3 to 4 areas. First one was the word flexibility keeps coming up, and that agility and flexibility, adapting to change. And it's something, obviously, I've learned very, very quickly within the department, that there is that flexibility within the department, within the 1,300 staff, and we have to continue to keep that at the focus. So it's something that I'm going to continue to work towards, how we adapt to the new needs, the changing world of work. And one area that I will be looking at in terms of the flexibility, and it came up in the group as well, like how do we get more people on a lifelong learning basis into the workforce, and whether we're meeting the needs of even stay-at-home parents. What options are we applying to them? Are we offering them full-time work? Is there options for part-time work, stay-at-home work? So that was what I was hearing as well. The other area that came up quite a bit was the whole area of responsiveness to change. The business needs a small to medium enterprise, and even looking at the whole Brexit area, where they've been planning the next 5 to 10 years. So businesses are planning ahead. So how responsive is the certification process, the qualification process, how we're responding to that was a big message as well. Third area was community. With community representatives there as well, but also what's going on in the community in an informal sector and on an informal basis. We have the formal construct from second level to third level, but how we look at what's happening. A lot of what's happening, there's people are experimenting with change in that area, so that's something we have to be vigilant on as well. In terms of the last point, and I think it was articulated very well by Ryan down the back, sorry for shaming you again, Ryan, a young secondary school student, and interestingly at our session there were lots of representatives of youth groups and young people and youth services. They all spoke, they all contributed, and the interesting thing was Ryan talked about his own personal experience on doing something different through the NIFTY programme outside of the mainstream secondary school process, and talked about the confidence that it gave him. And it's something that I picked up. I was picking up different threads, the lifelong learning, not just giving young people the confidence, but also giving people who have been out of the workforce, allowing them the progression to come back into the workforce. So look, they're just 3 or 4 areas. We've got a lot of more information. I'll certainly be feeding it back at an official level, but just want to thank my group, and hopefully John Delaney had a video in that room, because it was a real team effort, and everybody was working really, really hard, and maybe there could be a lesson for the future.
You don't have to sack the manager.
On that note, we'll move on to Minister Mary Mitchell O'Connor, increasing our labour market participation rates.
Yes, and we had 99% participation at our group. But specifically I was asked to look at barriers for women, people with disabilities, people that aren't represented in the labour market. And a lot of the conversation did talk about women and women returners. And there was one word used that I just want to put out there, and I want you to all think of it, because this is what's the reality for women. And the lady said, she's a very high flyer, she said she had 4 babies, so she was returning to work on 4 different occasions, and that it was petrifying on each occasion coming back to work. So I think we need to all really, that's the reality. Now, she did put forward a solution for people, and one was, for employers to kind of keep in touch when women are out on maternity leave, and then the other piece was to keep connected during maternity leave, but keeping connected as well, over a long period of time. The other point that came out, and we talked then also, about different supports that are out there. For example, Women Reboot, Springboard Plus, all of that will help to build confidence. Another point that was made very strongly to me was about barriers. Barriers for unrepresented groups, oftentimes for travellers, for older people. We have a question mark, is there ageism involved in the whole labour market? And then also for underrepresented groups, for example, people that have come into our country, maybe not with an Irish surname, applying for jobs and not being interviewed. Apprenticeships came up quite a lot. There was, first of all, people weren't taking up, young people weren't taking up apprenticeships. We talked about the role of career guidance teachers, counsellors. We talked also about the mothers of Ireland and fathers, obviously, and partners, encouraging people. But there was also identified difficulties for employers taking on the new apprentices because of the expense and that. So that has been noted by my officials. Flexible, you mentioned flexible working practices, working in the home, different hours being made available, paternity leave, parental leave were also mentioned. Some actually, were kind of critical of some of the legislation that we have that makes it difficult for employers to take on people. But all in all, there was one other point made, and that was around diverse groups in companies, languages, need for languages, but also to give people a chance when they get into work to kind of work their way up. So that, I think that was the main issues that we had.
Okay, thank you very much, Mary Mitchell O'Connor. Next, Minister Pat Breen, maximising the contribution of multinational enterprises to the Irish economy into the future.
Thank you very much indeed, Richard. I could say, I suppose, we had a good rugby team with us because we had players that played in every part of the field, and led by two great chiefs. We had the chief of the IDA and the deputy chief of Enterprise Ireland. So we had a really good discussion in relation to the role that multinational companies, I suppose, have played so far, but I suppose our task was to look at the future. And certainly I think the most important thing for us, particularly in relation to the FDI, was to continue to attract FDI into the country. Particularly with the intense competition that's out there at the moment now, and of course, as was mentioned earlier, the ever-changing world and the type of jobs that we're attracting into the country. I suppose two themes really dominated our session. It would have been education and R&D. And talent, of course, and that's also linked to education. Talent, everybody in the room agreed, was critical for us moving forward, and the education system needs to respond, I suppose, more quickly to the new skills and talent that's out there. We've seen the success of the Action Plan for Jobs, how all of us working together, whether it's the multinationals, small companies and the government, we're able to contribute to growing the number of jobs in the country, and that was extremely important. And also we looked at that as being as very much part of where we're going in the future. The need for, I suppose, more data scientists and more engineers was highlighted by a number of the multinational companies, so that when they go abroad to their the board members and whatever their group headquarters is, that they're able to say, we have this, we have that, so that instead of having to wait to attract talent into the country, that we have that almost ever ready. I think that was highlighted very much at the meeting as well, and of course that's really also important if you're to help SMEs. The SMEs, I suppose, are in the other area, I suppose, that we were asked to focus in on was the whole area of global sourcing, and the need for Irish companies to be able to source our multinationals. And we all agreed, and both the IDA and Enterprise Ireland, this was really working well together. And of course there's more you can do in relation to this. But there was a lot happening in this area for Irish indigenous companies to be able to supply into the big multinational companies out there. And there was need for more of that to continue in the future as well. We're never going to get 100% there, because companies and multinational companies would always look for value for money, and there are times maybe we can't do that, but of course being competitive was important as well. In relation to the SMEs, I suppose one of the key areas here in SMEs, we are lagging a little behind. That was illustrated by Julie, I think, earlier as well, in relation to R&D. And that's something that was focused very much, given the important role that SMEs have in the Irish economy, the fact that they account for nearly 98% of enterprises and employ 70% of the workforce. So that was critical for us, the need for SMEs to more or less grow. Not, I shouldn't say grow up, but to I suppose to get into the game more and what's happening out there. And we looked at putting more people into R&Ds, maybe getting the Enterprise Ireland to put people into the small to medium enterprises to assist them in that task for R&D, because we felt R&D was really important for small businesses as well, and of course the whole area of corporate venture as well. Okay. So that was more or less it, Richard.
That's great. Thank you very much, Minister. And finally to Minister Andrew Doyle, balanced development across Ireland.
Thank you, Richard. So I'm not going to claim percentage participation, but seeing as how the theme of ours was balanced, we had a balanced contribution from the community, the private sector, trade unions, worker representatives and the various government agencies. And I suppose just to put it in context, we were focused on one of the strategic outcomes as identified in Project 2040, strengthening rural economies and communities. Posed 3 questions: what sectors present the most opportunity for balanced development across Ireland? Are there specific future opportunities that should be targeted because of their potential for growth outside the main cities? And will the transition to the digital and low carbon economies impact differently across the region. So we broke it down. Basically, I suppose it broke down, should I say, and there was a lot of concise, which is another skill maybe, Joe, politicians need to learn, and constructive contributions. So that naturally, just to bring the three questions into the agri-food and marine sectors, were seen as obviously areas of potential, tourism, and using our national sustainability model and the environment as being the sort of footnote for that. The agri-food, just to go up the value chain, move up the value chain, and the bioeconomy, including advances in the marine and forestry bio sectors, biosciences and renewable energies were the areas seen there. Tourism and heritage, the Taoiseach said it himself, where we're not recognised where we don't do business, we're recognised because of our tourism, arts and heritage. So I think it's very important. The potential of clustering was identified as being, you know, something we really should pursue, and we had an example from Monaghan Biosciences where that sort of area is being developed, and breaking the prejudice of multinationals being based exclusively in Dublin. The gaps were identified as being those labour shortages and the need for more work permits, infrastructural deficits, and technology, in particular broadband. But if they were, you know, addressed, provide great opportunities for remote working, bringing more women into the workforce, and access to finance, which was outlined in earlier contributions for supporting small businesses.
That's
just
great.
Very
I'm
quickly,
sorry to cut across. Yeah, final point. Yeah.
Yeah, the actions being taken. The new bioeconomy hub in Lishin is an example. We've heard that there are partnerships between IT sector and around the country and enterprise agencies. And also, one interesting statistic came forward: 60% of the FDI jobs are from outside Ireland, outside Dublin. 64% are from within the existing FDI companies. And we had one example of the mentoring, where it's an Irish company. Irish distillers are helping some of the craft distilleries to grow and focus. So, to use the board B phrase, co-opetition is actually in place already. Thank you.
You managed to cram a lot of points into the last point there as well, which is a skill in itself. Thank you very much to ministers. Now, we have a little bit of time. The ministers are very tight on time, and I'm conscious that we ran over a little bit in relation to the sessions and getting back into the room. But maybe a couple of questions. Anyone want to put a hand up who has a question? Yes, we have. We'll get you a mic now, Sean. 1 second. It's just over here. Yep.
Firstly, could I compliment the government on this initiative? Too often in this country, we're operating in the back foot. This time we're in the forward foot. So well done. My question will be to do with Julie Spillan's presentation, which I think everybody will acknowledge was a fantastic presentation. And basically, she said what we were looking at here is a big bet. And normally in business, when you're looking at big bets, make it too early, it's high risk. Make it too late, it's fatal. I think this is different. You can't make this early enough. It is today's world, and we have to make it. And to the question of 2030, what I'd like to be able to say in 2030 is, this is a country that 11 years ago made a big bet. So my question to the ministers is, are we going to make that big bet?
Minister, you want to take that? Heather Humphreys?
Yes, well, I think we've had a very useful morning here, and it's been great to hear the views of businesses. And there's great ambition out there, and I have absolutely no doubt that by working together, we can achieve by 2030 a country that is at the cutting edge of new technology, that has good quality jobs, and that people are at work, and we have employment, jobs that are sustainable into the future. So I do believe that this is the right thing to do. And as you said, time is not on our side. We've got to do it now, and we really do appreciate that people taking their time out of today, taking time out of their busy schedules. And I know everybody's busy, but this has been really worthwhile for us as government to hear your views. And I'm going to make sure that the views that are here today and that have been the issues that have been highlighted are dealt with, and they'll be part of the plan.
Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, we have a question over here. This gentleman towards the front. Yep, we'll get you a mic now.
Thank you. Colin Clark with the Irish Second Level Students' Union. I think education came up in probably everybody's panel discussion, and just in particular about Leaving Cert and Leaving Cert reform. I know there's a consultation going on at the moment. But at what level do we do we all have to start supporting the fact that we need Leaving Cert reform, and we need to, I suppose, in terms of critical thinking and analysis and creativity, support that? And at what stage, when the backlash from the unions comes, do we have to be brave as a government and make those decisions?
Minister Joe McHugh, do you want to take that?
Yeah, briefly. Thanks, Colin. Look, we've had the junior cert reform. We're also going to be looking at primary school reform. We're looking at English and Irish at the moment. We're looking at the whole curriculum review as well. And Leaving Cert reform is critical, but that's already happening without the all in-depth analysis, like we're bringing in computer science. We're also bringing in PE, but we need the facilities and the infrastructure around that. So it's a bit of at the moment, like we're saying, we're bringing in a PE curriculum. That's going to happen, but then questions will be asked: do we have the gymnasiums? Do we have the infrastructure? So there was a good bit of work done between Richard Bruton and my colleague Brendan Griffin in terms of sports capital. Can we have schools applying for grants? So there is that adaptation that's needed, but we're committed to the reform. I know there's a kind of a generalisation that now you've got creative thinking in primary school, creative thinking up to junior cert level, and then you're back into the rote learning space and Leaving Cert. But I don't agree with that. And there's numerous examples. I was in the Society and Politics class in St Eunan's in Letterkenny on Monday morning, and these young people and the young people of Ireland, they're grappling with the big issues, environmental change. They're grappling with the enormous challenges to do with Brexit in terms of massive flows of migration from sub-Saharan Africa. They're grappling with these issues, and they are the people that show in the lead. And I think there is the flexibility within the Leaving Cert. It's happening, but we have to continue to adapt to change. And maybe just Sean's question about, are we taking the big bet? We certainly are.
Okay, I'm afraid I'm going to have to wrap it up because the ministers are under pressure to go. They have to be back in Leinster House, and there are Dáil votes, and far be it from me to stand in the way of legislative progress and all of that. But my thanks to all of the ministers. But Minister Heather Humphreys is going to stay behind for a few minutes. Thank you very much. Thank you.